Okay, so now let's take a look at configuring sites and subnets in Active Directory. Now the idea here is we may have a multi-site network, so we have multiple locations in different cities. And by creating different sites, we can manage Active Directory replication between those different sites. And that becomes important when we're replicating over wide area network links rather than over local area network links, because we might not want them to follow the same replication schedule because that would impact network traffic. So let's go to Tools and Active Directory Sites and Services. Let's start by looking at waiting for our tool to come up. There we go. All right, let's start by looking at what we've got here. We have intersite transports, we have subnets, and we have the default first site name. Now, when you install Active Directory for the first time, it creates this default first site name. Nobody ever said Microsoft was creative. So let's start with that one. Under the default first site name, we have some NTDS site settings, and then we have all of the servers that are currently part of that particular site. Now, we don't have to keep this default first site name. So let's right click and let's rename that to something else. Let's call this Yakima. Um, and then let's say we're going to create another site. Let's say we're going to put a site in Richland. So I'm going to right click on sites and click on new site, and I'm going to choose Richland. Now, this is which site link we're going to use. And we're going to talk about site links here in just a minute. Now I'm going to click OK, and that's going to create site Richland. And click OK, and here is Richland. All right, now both Yakima and Richland are using this IP intersite transport, and this is the default one that's created. It's default IP site link. Now, the important thing about this is going to be the cost, the replication interval, and the replication schedule. So let's open up this one first. This will show us which sites are using this link. Now, if all of your wide area network connections are similar, you can honestly get away with just using this one site link, because it doesn't necessarily define the physical link between sites. What it does is it defines the replication schedule between sites and then the cost. Now, let's say you have multiple sites, however, and some of them have high-speed WAN links between each other and some of them have low speed, then you might want to set different replication schedules, which means you create different site links. And that's where this cost comes into play. Active Directory will create a map of all of the links using, or all of the sites using particular links, and it will replicate based on whatever path costs the least. And so that's where your cost comes into play. So if this was a lower speed link, you might want to give it a higher cost. If it was a higher speed link, you might want to give it a lower cost. And then if Yakima is connected to Richland and Richland is connected to Pasco and Pasco is connected back to Yakima, Active Directory would pick whichever links had the lowest cost. So you might end up with multiple different site links here based on the speeds, the different site links approximating or representing the actual wide area network connection links. So we have the cost. We also have the replication, or the replicate every, and this is currently set to 180 minutes. Now the reason it's so long is because WAN links are normally much slower than LAN links. So you don't want Active Directory replicating as often. If you have it replicating at the same schedule it is on LAN links, you're going to use up a lot of your WAN bandwidth to handle that replication. Now you can set a schedule down here and say the times that we want to allow this to replicate. So you might say, I don't want this to replicate Monday through Friday, 10 to 6. You can turn off replication not available, and then it won't replicate during those periods of time. Now the downside of that means that if you make a change in Active Directory, let's say Tuesday at noon, it's not going to replicate till after 6 o'clock on Tuesday night. So think carefully about that and how that's going to impact your management. All right, so what if we wanted to create another site link? Let's say we were going to connect Richland and Pasco, and they were going to have a slower link. So let me create a new site link. So I'm going to click New Site Link, and I'm going to call this one, let's do Slow Link. I feel really creative at the moment too. And then I can choose which sites are using this link. And in order to create it, it has to have at least 2 sites. And I'm going to go ahead and leave these 2, and I'm just going to change that in a few minutes. So I'm going to hit OK, and then I'm going to open up my slow link, and I can set the cost. And let's say this is going to cost 200, and I want it to replicate every 4 hours. All right, now in order for this to work, I need to create another site. So I'm going to right click and create a new site, and I'm going to call it Pasco. And Pasco is going to use this slow link, and I'm going to hit OK. So now Richland is using a couple of different site links. That's not what I wanted. Let me go to my site links. Richland is using the default IP site link, and it's going to connect to Yakima using the default IP site link. It's great. The slow link, Yakima is not actually going to use, so we're going to remove Yakima from that, and the slow link is going to be between Richland and Pasco. And I'm going to hit Apply and OK. So now Yakima is connected to Richland using the default IP site link. Richland is connected to Pasco using the slow link. And now you can visualize how by creating those links and those sites, this begins to take effect. Okay, so that's site links and sites. Now the other thing is going to be subnets. So every site is going to have at least one IP subnet. So let me come to my subnets, and I'm going to create a new subnet. And the prefix is going to be the IPv4 network ID. So I'm just going to go with some default 192.168.1.0/24. And that gives me the prefix in Active Directory, and that's going to be used in Yakima. And I'm going to hit OK. And then let me create a new one. And 192.168.2.0/24. And we're going to say that one is also going to be used in Yakima. Now these don't have to be defaults. They can be something other than the major classifiable address. Let me create a new subnet, 192.168.3.0/25. And I'm going to assign that one to Richland. And then I'm going to create another subnet, 192.168.3.128/25. I'm going to assign that one to Pasco. So now with this information in Active Directory, what will happen is when a device has an IP address that matches one of these subnets, we will know which site it goes to. And by being able to put devices in sites, so we put client devices in sites, we put servers in sites, we put directory services in sites, other services in sites, then what happens is the clients will know which services are closest to them. So then they can pull, let's say, Active Directory from another server in the same site. So let's say Yakima, if we've got a client in Yakima, rather than going to, let's say, the Active Directory server that's in Pasco. So this is going to help manage our Active Directory traffic. So that's how we can create sites and subnets to represent our actual physical wide area network structure inside Active Directory.